Hello, and welcome to the C3 Method Podcast with your host, Robert Polenic. Today we're going to talk about the impact of meal timing on body composition. I have a master's in nutrition and I've trained clients to IFBB and Natural Pro Cards. And that would be, in a sense, the peak of body composition is how can you have the most amount of muscle being the leanest as possible and stay alive. So that has been quite a fun process. I've really enjoyed that aspect of my coaching. I have a lot of other certifications and I coach people for other things as well. And one of the things we look for, even with strength athletes, peak body composition is important because what they weigh, often they're divided by their weight in their competitions, but of what they weigh, we want to be useful weight. So it's important if they have a weight class limit that we pack on as much useful muscle as we can within that limit and the least amount of unuseful body weight, which would be body fat. It's interesting in the sense I'm hesitating a bit to say like to get as lean as you can because there are some people I work with, for example, female swimmers. I've helped female swimmers at Division I level and even Olympic level, and they don't want to be too lean. So there are some sports and some athletes where body composition, like the peak or optimal body composition, isn't as lean as possible. So that's why I might hesitate to use that phrasing. In today's video, what I want to talk about is for anyone, even if they're not an aesthetic athlete, meaning they're not doing bikini, fit model, wellness, women's physique, figure, all those categories. And then men, there's men's classic physique, men's physique and bodybuilding. I know I got those disorganized. There's just so many of them. So if you're not an aesthetic athlete, it's still going to be important for you to have peak body composition. And often the way that we would eat for peak body composition is also going to help us with peak performance. And how well we perform does then conversely impact our composition. So it's all blended in together is our eating for optimal performance blends in with eating for optimal body composition. The only caveat, well, there's probably many caveats, but one that comes to mind right away would be towards the end of a contest prep. If somebody's an aesthetic athlete, they're not going to be at peak performance, but they're going to be super shredded. So there is a little bit of a trade-off towards the end of that type of process. So what I want to do today is to discuss the ways in which people mismanage meal timing, why that can give them a look of almost like skinny fat, where you might be lean, but you're soft, and there's this layer of water, there's this layer of like film, it's just something that isn't crisp about the physique. You're gonna see that if you mismanage meal timing. So I want to talk about why that's the case and then how we can adjust for that. In general, if we want to kind of make this simple to understand, when we mismanage meal timing, we cause extra stress to the body. That stress then increases cortisol. An increase in cortisol causes an increase in water retention. That is, in a sense, going to be the main culprit for why we have a softer look than we would like. Related to meal timing, to where somebody might be quote unquote lean or fit, or they're at a good body fat percentage, but they don't like the way they look. And that can be because they're mismanaging the meal timing, which is then causing increase in cortisol and causing increase in water retention. So often for those people, they might break off their plan and have like extra food with friends or go out and have a date night or whatever it is. They just kind of break from their plan. They have some extra food. They wake up the next day and they're tighter and they actually look even better. And they're like, what the heck? You know, like I can eat all this junk and it actually makes me look better. And then they're really confused as to what they should do. And that's because that extra junk can reduce the stress the body's experiencing, and that reduces water retention, and therefore they get the crispy look that they're looking for. This is why in weight loss diets or fat loss diets, when somebody's been really pushing pretty hard in their diet, they might do what's called a refeed day, or if they're doing caloric cycling, they just have a high calorie day versus a lower calorie day. And that refeed or those high calorie days, you can actually sometimes increase your either total calories, depending on what you've been doing leading into that, or you increase your carbohydrates, maybe you bring your protein down, increase your carbohydrates up, the person actually weighs less the next day. They might actually lose weight and they look crisper. And that's because they dropped a bunch of water retention, which was related to bringing down the stress. So if they've been dieting for a prolonged period of time, really pushing the body to drop body fat, but the weight is kind of stagnant or even like starting to go up a smidge, and it's like, this doesn't make any sense. You know, I'm in a calorie deficit, I'm active every day, why is my weight going down? Sometimes that can be because the body's too stressed. You throw in that high day or that refeed day, and then all of a sudden that stress comes down, water retention comes down. Now, what I usually see people do is when they're most active, they tend to deprioritize getting food in because they have their normal activities of daily life, plus they're trying to throw in a workout, and maybe they just run around like a chicken with their head cut off, so they're not paying attention to food very much. That is going to lead to them having their highest level of activity. The highest time period of the day or the moment of activity is often associated then with the lowest amount of food intake. And then once they're done with their workout and they're going about throughout their day, maybe the busyness, the chaoticness of the day comes down. Now all of a sudden it's more awareness of, holy crap, I'm kind of hungry and now I actually have time to eat. So now I'm going to eat food. And now all of a sudden their activity is low, but their food is high. So that's usually what we see is inconsistent eating. Most people are overweight or not optimal body composition because of inconsistent eating, not overeating. And then somebody might think, well, what about under eating? Yeah, it's even usually not even that being the case. Most people think they're, for example, overweight from overeating. That's actually not the case. It's inconsistent eating. And then you might say, well, maybe I'm soft and under muscled because I'm chronically under eating. That's probably true to some degree, but again, it goes back to inconsistent eating. We want to be more consistent with our food. The more consistent we are, the leaner we're going to appear, the better we're going to perform, and overall our body composition improves. Now, how would we define consistency is when we move more, we eat more, we move less, we eat less. That's the summary of it. Now, eating more is in reference to calories, not volume. And that can be where a lot of people struggle is, oh my gosh, I'm so busy, I'm supposed to be working out, I don't want to work out with a full stomach, I don't have time to eat a full meal. We don't need any of that, we just need calories. So you can do differing forms of calories. That can be a shake, a drink, it can be quick foods that you just grab and go, you peel the top off of something and start eating it. It doesn't have to be, chicken and rice or oatmeal and all those traditional foods that we would think of for peak body composition. We're really thinking of when I'm most active, I am using the most fuel. So I want to have the most fuel available. When I'm less active, I am using less fuel, so I want to have less fuel available. That's essentially what we're really looking to do. So when I talk with clients, one of the things, like I just did a consultation yesterday with a guy, he has an inconsistent schedule. So we're going to talk about how we manage that. And everybody, even if you think you have a consistent schedule, life throws you curveballs from time to time. So there's going to be some inconsistency, maybe a doctor's appointment, life event, you're blow a tire in your car, whatever it might be, something happens and you have to make a change from your normal routine. We want to know how we make those changes appropriately. So for this client, they had a very variable schedule. They're a business owner, they got to do a lot of community interactions, they're trying to fit their workout in along with running a business, along with managing employees, a whole bunch of stuff. Now, for them, they might say, oh yeah, I love to work out in the morning. But maybe out of Monday through Friday, they only get to work out in the morning maybe 2 days a week because another day there's an event going on, another day they get a call and something's wrong with at the store or the business, and they got to fix that and deal with that before they can go work out. So we might have this ideal schedule in our head, and if somebody asked us, when do you normally do XYZ, you would have your answer. But if you look at the reality of that, it might be more variable than what you would think. That's very common. So what I was telling them to do was to manage their day in time blocks. If we think of a 24-hour day, we're hopefully sleeping at least 6 of those hours. So we have 18 hours that we're awake. We can divide those 18 hours into 3 sections of roughly about 6 hours. It doesn't have to be 6 hours on the dot. It just gives you a ballpark of what to estimate around. So we have 3 6-hour sections during the day. The first roughly 6 hours of being awake, the next 6 hours of being awake, and then the final roughly 6 hours of being awake. The reason why I like to do this is if we manage these time blocks correctly, we can have periods of our day where we're fueling up for activity and fueling performance to optimize the stimulus that we want to create the body we want, whether that's creating it for strength, aesthetics, explosiveness, whatever it might be that you're training for. But we want to fuel our training. Then we want to fuel recovery. But then away from our training, we might as well optimize to be very lean, if not losing body fat. For most people, that's going to give them peak body composition, is I fuel performance, I recover from performance, and I keep my body fat really low outside of that time. Then if we think of the time windows, what's nice about that is the time window associated with my workout. So if I work out in the morning, that's the first time block, the first 6 hours of the day. I'm going to allocate more total calories, and we're specifically looking at carbohydrates and fats in that first time block, and then I'm going to bring my carbohydrates and fats down in the next 2 time blocks. And that allows me to fuel my activity in that first time block, but then keep my carbs and fats in an appropriate range the rest of the day, so I'm not accruing unwanted body fat, but I'm also not severely under eating to the point where I get super hungry at the end of the day, and now all of a sudden I gorge and eat a whole bunch of food at night, and that does not help my peak body composition. So time blocks is great. If you work out in the middle of the day, that's fine. The first time block of the day is going to be more of that lower kind of medium range. You're going to eat more during that second time block when you would be working out, and then eat less again during that third time block. If you think about percentages, what I usually do with clients is I take their daily goal of protein, and let's just, for math's sake, to make it easy for me, let's say they have 180 grams of protein a day. Well, we're going to divide that by 3, so that's 60 grams. In the first 6 hours of the day, they're going to get roughly 60 grams of protein. That's going to be their target. The next 6 hours, another 60. The final 6 hours, another 60. So we tend to divide protein out pretty evenly throughout the day. The reason why is we don't need protein to peak leading into a workout. There's really not major benefit of doing that. You're just going to put more stuff in your belly that you have to process and gets in the way of the carbs and fats in the fueling, and then maybe you have a full belly that you don't really want to work out with. So there's no need to preload our workout with protein. And then if you think about, well, maybe I want to have protein the most it can be right after my workout. We don't need our total volume of protein to be so high after the workout. There really is only a certain amount of protein we can process well at one time. And the recovery process after our workouts, especially if you're doing weight training, that's the assumption I'm making in this conversation, is that you're doing weight resistance training, is that recovery process takes a hell of a lot longer than 6 hours. It can take 24, 36, 48 hours, even longer than that, depending on the intensity of training. So that time block of 6 hours around your training, it isn't so important that we jam all the protein in then, and then who cares about, from then on out. The recovery process from workouts takes days. So we want to make sure that we do have protein available in that post-workout window, but we don't have to have the most amount ever, and we don't even really need to even peak or shift a certain amount. Like we don't have to do 60 in the morning, 100 post-workout, then only 20 at the end of the day. That's not going to be a good thing to do. That doesn't optimize our recovery. When I did my master's in nutrition, we had to do a thesis, and it was a 50-page paper, 200 peer-reviewed research articles, and a whole bunch of other stuff. But it was a really cool paper. I did mine on the anabolic window, and that was basically finding out how important is it to get protein in 20 minutes post-workout. I looked at the benefits of varying amounts of protein 20 minutes post-workout, and then should the protein be paired with simple carbohydrates? Does that help at all? And then over the course of the next 24 hours, what allocation of protein mattered? Did it matter if I got most of my protein post-workout and then less of it 24 hours later, or an even, or whatever, whatever the ratios were? And through all the research, it found out that exactly what I thought was, yes, it is helpful to get protein in after the workout as soon as possible so your body can start doing repairs. However, we just want to have a nice steady stream over the next 24 hours, and that's going to be the best benefit. So we don't need to front load protein. We don't need to post load protein. Protein can be nice and steady throughout the day. So that's what we're going to do with protein. Now, carbs and fats. Those are our energy resources, and if we mismanage those, that can cause, if we undereat them and then exercise, that causes the increase in cortisol. If we overeat them, that just causes a bunch of body fat that we don't want, so we don't want to do that either. We want to have those more optimized, and they are going to be optimized or more sensitive to our activity. If I'm less active, I want less of those things. If I'm more active, I want more of those things. Whereas we said with protein, it's just steady state all day. Carbs and fats, we do fluctuate. Now, if we're doing weight resistance training, chances are you're working out less than 90 minutes. And even if you're doing intense training, you're still going to be doing it in spurts where you're kind of blasting out an effort. You're creating an increase in stress in the body, whether that's just 10 seconds or 3 minutes. You know, you do an explosive heavy lift, or you're doing like some kind of weird crazy circuit thing. And it's going to be somewhere in that range. And then you take a rest period. Then you do a blast of effort, rest period, blast of effort, rest period. It's going to be those intervals, like an interval wave. Now, when we do that type of activity, carbohydrates tend to be the better fuel for most people. There are going to be examples every once in a while where somebody might feel fine off ketones, but it's less likely. So when we're doing interval-based in high intensity then resting, high intensity then resting, carbohydrates are better because of the way in which we use our fuel sources. The first initial few seconds of explosive activity, we use creatine phosphate. That's why people supplement with creatine monohydrate. Then it goes into using glucose, and that's stored within our muscles. And then we start to break down kind of oxygen and go into all these other processes. Now, if you're doing steady state, low intensity activity, maybe long duration running, there you might have a better benefit from a lower amount of carbohydrates and a higher amount of fats, because you're just going to, like, into that initial phase of effort is only once. So you're only going to use an initial bout of creatine phosphate to get moving, initial bout of glucose. Then once you're moving, you're staying moving. And at that point, you're looking at oxidative breakdown, and that's going to be like aerobic versus anaerobic fuel sources, let's say. So for that, you can definitely lean into more dietary fats, since they tend to break down slower, provide that lower level of energy, but a more sustainable level of energy, whereas carbohydrates tend to hit quick and fall out quick. But if you're doing intensity-based training, interval-based training, and only 60-90 minutes, like weight training, that's going to be actually better for you. That does match what you need. With all that said, if I'm doing weight training, carbohydrates are going to be my better fuel source. So the time block that I'm doing my workouts, I want to try to eat some carbohydrates before the workout. You can, depending on how much you get in before the workout, depending on how well you tolerate intra-workout drinks, you can also take carbohydrates while you work out. And then post-workout, there is benefits to taking simple carbohydrates to help, quote unquote, shuttle the protein into the muscle cells. When we consume simple carbohydrates, we, in a sense, can increase, like through insulin reaction, we can increase the uptake of protein. Now, that would depend on the type of protein you're consumed. Is it already digestible and available in the bloodstream? Is it broken down into amino acids yet? Or if you ate, like a steak after the workout, that's not going to help, because that's not going to break down fast enough for that to be useful. But if you're using something like a whey isolate protein powder, sure. You can add in simple carbohydrates that helps pull in that protein powder into the muscle cells a little bit faster, like the shuttling effect. And that can help increase, just start the process of recovery sooner. And then you would still want to have a whole food protein source. So that way, as the whey protein gets used up, that whole food source has been starting to break down and starting to release into the bloodstream now. So for carbohydrates, we want to eat ahead of the workout. If we can't get a lot of in, and we have like an energy crash in the middle of the workout, that's where usually an intra-workout can help, because that can help sustain energy in the back half of the workout. And then after the workout, especially if you work out in the morning, it's good to have some carbohydrates so you have some energy throughout the rest of the day. And then in the other time blocks, you can bring down the percentage of carbohydrates, bring up the percentage of fats, and that gives you a more slow, steady stream of energy, given that at that time you probably only need a slow, steady stream of energy because you're doing a slow, steady stream of activity. If my activity is slow and low, then I want a higher percentage of fats. If my activity is intervals and like high intense, then I do want carbohydrates. I'm going to lean more so into carbohydrates. So these are some ways in which we can think of structuring the macronutrients depending on our activity. If I'm doing high, quick, explosive activity, carbohydrates. If I'm doing slow and low activity, then I want fats. So that'll help. Now, the amount, we're getting into the chaos here as well, is if we think of our total daily calorie target, we would divide that by 3. So that gives us the amount we would need per time block. However, if our protein is consistent, we then can modify the amount of carbs and fats contributing calories towards that total calorie amount. So in that total calorie amount, I might say to myself is maybe my goal is 2,100 calories. So if I evenly distribute it, it would be 700 calories per time block. But maybe I work out I'm going to work out in one of those time blocks. I want to allocate more calories towards that time because I'm going to be more active. Now, how much you allocate, it's a live and learn process. There's individual factors. I can't really give you that great of an amount, but we can play with it and kind of see how we feel. What I like to do typically is to start, like for example, if it was 700, 700, 700 across our time blocks, I might pull 100 away from the 2 time blocks I'm not working out in and put that extra 100 per time block, so 200 calories, put that in the time block I am working out in. So now it's 900, 600, 600. And I would see how that feels. If that felt good, I'm going to leave it there. If I want to experiment a little bit, maybe I'm like, oh, I had an okay workout, I had okay energy, but I didn't have like crush it energy. So maybe now I'm going to pull 150 away from those other time blocks and put that towards a time block that I'm active. So now all of a sudden I'm adding 300 calories to that 700. So now it's 1,000 calories in that time block that I'm working out with, and then only, what would that be, 550 in the other 2 time blocks. And you would start to see, okay, how does that feel? Did that feel better, or did I start to get really hungry in that second time block at only 550? Maybe I need to pull some of those calories out and make sure I leave some calories back there so I'm not starving before I go to bed. So there's a little bit of experimenting with it. But when we make that calorie change, if we know our protein's consistent, then the calories that are changing have to come from carbs and fats. We don't need to track our actual carbs and fats. That's unnecessary. Just track total calories and protein, and you are secondarily actually controlling your carbs and fats. So this is the way that I would structure this for peak body composition, is breaking your day into time blocks, 3 6-hour time blocks. And again, it doesn't have to be 6 hours exactly, but it just gives you a time frame. And then in that time block, say, what's my activity? Am I sitting on my butt not doing much? I'm probably going to need the lower amount of calories. Maybe I'll bring, instead of that average, that divided by 3 average, say if it was 700, I'm going to bring that down maybe 600, and I'm going to focus more on fats in this time block because I'm sitting on my butt not doing much. So I know I'm getting my baseline protein in. I'm going to focus more on fat-based foods and carbohydrate foods. And I'm going to go a little bit lower than that calorie average across the time blocks. And now I save 100 calories for later in the day when I'm going to be more active. So that might be how we manage a low activity time block. Then the time block that we're maybe getting before a workout. So maybe you work out midday and you're like, well, I wake up in the morning. In the morning, I might want to start to carb load, like glycogen load, my muscles. Now, there's a whole bunch of stuff we can break down with. It depends on what you did the day before. It depends on the carbohydrate sources you have. It depends on water intake, sodium intake, the digestion rate of the carbohydrate sources. Can you actually form glycogen by the time the workout comes? There's a lot to unpack with that. So I'm going to have to skip a lot of those details. But the concept would be is I don't want to undereat the time block right before I work out if I'm working out on the front end of that time block. For example, let's say I wake up at 6 and I work out at noon. I don't want to have from 6 o'clock to noon be super low. And then I'm like, oh, okay, now I'm in my second time block. This is where I have my high calories to fuel my workout. But you're already at your workout. So you have to do the workout and then you would eat your high calories. That doesn't help. So you're only working out then on the energy that you got from that first time block. So maybe on the first time block, you have the front half of those 5 to 6 hours is low, and then all of a sudden you eat a high carbohydrate based food in that middle of that time block, and that ramps you up into that noon workout. Then after the workout, you have a carb-based meal, but then you start to bring down the carbohydrates to go into the evening window. That's essentially what we're looking to do. So the time blocks are more so just to give you an awareness that you can break your day down into sections. And if we only have to manage 6 hours at a time, that's a lot easier to manage mentally and emotionally, because you're really only managing 1 to 2 meals at a time. What do I need this meal? How much protein? How many carbs and fats? And then do I want more so fats or more so carbs? Easy choices to make when there only has to be 1 or 2 at a time. So I really like that structure. It really helps a lot of people. Over half our clients are personal trainers, and then a lot of them and other clients are business owners that have really demanding schedules, and it's chaotic, a little bit of like all around the place. When we manage our day in time blocks, it always goes a lot better, and it allows them to realize that parts of the day they can lose fat, parts of the day they can fuel performance. It doesn't have to be, was this a fat loss day or a performance day? You don't have to divide a day by 24 hours. You're missing a lot of opportunities for micromanagement if you are only doing 24-hour time blocks. And then micromanagement can seem overwhelming, but it's not if you're only managing 6 hours at a time. So this helps us have more specificity to what we do, but not feeling overwhelmed while we increase that specificity. I think I covered everything I wanted to cover. Is that if we do the typical thing, which is when people eat less when they're more active, they eat more when they're less active. So they're inverse. You're not going to have peak body composition. You're just not. You're going to underperform in your workouts. You might not even realize it because that's what you've always done. And you won't even realize that you could be a lot stronger, could be a lot more muscular, could have a lot better energy, a lot better experience in your training. So if you start to shift your calories around, you might realize, holy crap, I'm way stronger than I thought. Or holy crap, I dropped some water retention. I can see some extra veins. I'm actually looking pretty good. I'm not as sloppy as I thought I was. So if you've never played with eating more when you move more, eating less when you move less, I would really suggest that. It's going to open up a lot to you, like a whole new world in regards to what you think you're capable of and how you'll feel. And then, like we said, eating more when you move more doesn't mean more volume. It just means more calories. So lean into simple carbohydrates, easier to eat carbohydrates like cereal. Eating a bowl of Frosted Flakes is going to be a lot easier than eating a bowl of oatmeal. Yeah, the Frosted Flakes is just sweeter, digests a little faster, doesn't feel as heavy as the oatmeal does. We might need to play around with foods that you would typically think are like quote unquote bad for you or no-nos. They actually are okay. We want fast digesting carbohydrates before a workout. So bowls of cereal, even candy or something like that is fine. As long as the calories are controlled and you know you're burning those calories off through the workout, that's totally fine. The goal of eating food before the workout is so it's available at the workout. So if you're eating 90 minutes before your workout, you want to eat something that digests and is available in 90 minutes. You don't want to be eating some kind of steel cut oats 90 minutes before a workout, because that's probably still going to be in your belly as you go into the workout. Being okay with playing around with the types of foods can really help. And same thing with protein. Make sure you select a fast digesting protein leading into the workouts, so that way it's not just sitting in your belly, it's actually available in the bloodstream. And then away from the workouts, you want to pick more solid, slower digesting protein sources. So I think we covered a lot of good concepts here. If you have any specific questions, you're always welcome to put them in the comment section of whatever you're watching or listening to this on. You can also send me an email at our website, which is c3method.com, C-T-H-R-E-E method.com. And there you can also sign up for a consultation if you want to be a one-on-one client. And we do our nutrition coaching certification. So if you'd like to learn how to manage not only your own nutrition, but to be able to help others as well in a nutrition system that accounts for health, but also performance and aesthetics, it's rare to find a nutrition certification program that focuses on aesthetics. So ours focuses on all three of those. Our certification is also taught one-on-one. You and I literally converse back and forth like this in a virtual conversation. So it's not read a book, take a test, and you're done. It's actually we talk. I teach you through the process. It takes about 4 hours, actually. So we usually split that into 2 to 3 sessions. And then after we go through that, I help with implementation. So I'm available for 3 months to help you as you navigate with clients. Hey, Rob, what do I do in this situation? Rob, what do I do in this situation? I'm there. You can message me anytime on WhatsApp and I'll answer the questions. It's a really cool process because you get a nutrition certification, but you also get taught one-on-one, you get implementation support, and I even teach how to market the service and price the service and do all the other businessy aspects around the service as well. It's a full, complete certification to the point where no other certification has those elements. I really love it. My approach towards that certification was, what would I want? What would I need? And now that I've been doing this for 25 years, I have a pretty good idea of what I need. So I want to be able to give that to others as quickly as I can so they don't have to wait 25 years to learn all this stuff. So if you're interested in that, you can also sign up for that on our website as well. So c3method.com. I appreciate your time. Hopefully this was helpful. If you need anything, let me know. That's it. Okay. Thank you very much.